Hello everyone. Welcome to another Outriders Worldslayer video. Today I'm sharing with you a bonus firepower build using the Scorched Zealot set, the new legendary for the pyromancer. The first time I tried this set I was a little disappointed. I tried to build this a little differently, not using a lot of firepower, but using skill damage and debuffs. However, after a few tests I finally found what in my opinion is a very good starting point to increase both your single target air AOE DPS, so volcanic rounds, and the Scorched Zealot set deals a lot of damage, debuffs the enemies, destroys the enemies, bosses, AOE, single target, very good, very impressed with what we get from this set. But without any further delay, let's start with our skills. Because we're focusing on a firepower build, Volcanic Rounds is a must. It transforms our normal damage into skill damage, ignoring all armor and inflict burn to enemies. Feed the Flames is a must because the Scorched Zealot melee actually scales with Feed the Flames, which is an actually very good combination with both our firepower build and the Scorched Zealot set. And Ash Blast is one of the best debuffs we can use. Inflicts ash to a lot of enemies, stops them, debuffs them for extra damage, so I do like all this combination. Basically the hat trick when you're going with a bonus firepower build. So let's have a look now at the armor and mods. Now we're using the head, the chest and the legs of the Scorched Zealot set. All these have bonus firepower, cooldown reduction, close range damage, apart from the head that instead of cooldown reduction has healing received. Let's talk a little bit how the set works, because after I understood how it works, I then managed to make the best setup. The set bonus transforms your melee attack into a projectile that explodes upon impact, dealing damage equal to your firepower and inflicts ash. For each enemy we hit with Feed the Flames, it will increase the damage of the projectile by 25% up to 100%. The bonus is spent on the next melee skill used, so this is very good actually, because it basically transforms your melee skill. So all the mods that work for the melee skill work with Scorched Zealot, because for now, for example, you see that it deals almost 3 million when I have only 1.2 million firepower. Why is that? It's because I'm using some mods that affect the melee skills. Also, I have to mention that now our melee projectile actually doesn't have a range. You can shoot it across the map for an enemy if you see it, for example, very far, an elite or a very high health enemy, or a group of enemies that are hiding behind cover. Just shoot it from range and just watch them disappear from your map, because you don't have to pay attention, just see your map and they will disappear. Let's have a closer look at each armor piece I'm using in the mods. For the head, I replaced the second mod because it involves Flame Wave, so Ash and Bloom, although it's not the best one we can use, it's the only one we have because we're not using Flame Wave. Bloodlust is my Apocalypse mod. I want to replace this in the first chance I get. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. It's okay. Concussive Force, this is a must mod in my opinion. Not because only it increases your melee damage skill by 25% and by extension the Scorched Zealot set bonus, it increases the range by 50%. I have tested this actually works. Instead of 5 meter radius, it will have now 7.5 meter radius. It's a huge difference, believe me. You hit a lot of more enemies and by extension you deal a lot more damage. For the chest, the second mod that transforms our set bonus to deal a lot of damage, Brown. 100% increased damage for melee skill. So that's why you see the damage increase here. A must in my opinion, once again, in case to maximize your single target AOE. Ash and Boost is actually pretty decent. We inflict Ash with both our skills and our melee skill now, so it's very good. I have Captain Hunter, which makes this actually chest one of the best ones I have, the Apocalypse here, and Captain Hunter, it's also one of the highly recommended tier 3 mods you can use. For the legs we have to use Cauterizing Flames, which is actually pretty decent. Overheal will now grant you firepower from the Feed the Flame skill based on how much overheal you get. Up to 50% extra firepower. This can actually be very well with 5 seconds duration and almost 5 seconds cooldown. You can have this almost 90-100% uptime, so it's very decent. I have added Bullet Absorption, which will replenish 40% ammo for your magazine, and I actually have Flame Grasper, the tier 3 mod that enables absorption for 2 additional targets, so my legs are also kind of god roll with all the 3 mods I'm using. For the 2 epic pieces, we actually need the combination I have. Anomaly power, status power, one has to have close range damage and the other must have cooldown reduction. Now, why anomaly power instead of bonus firepower? For 2 reasons. One, we gain more benefit by having anomaly power for now instead of firepower because of the weapon mods we're going to use, and second, anomaly power scales with the damage from the burn, and it's a little better for survivability with a little bit of skill life leech. Even if you don't find anomaly power, bonus firepower is fine, but I do believe that anomaly power for the 2 pieces is still one of the best options you can use. For the gloves in specific, I'm using Death Sentence, Bullet Kindling and Ash increase range. This way your Ash Blast will debuff the enemies for extra damage. Bullet Kindling probably one of the must mods when you use a pyromancer, 12% extra damage against enemies inflicted by burn. And for the feat, this is the weak link for my build specific because it has Death's Door and Wide Grip. Wide Grip, in my opinion, is a little overkill. You won't get the maximum benefit from the Scorched Zealot set without Wide Grip. It's not necessary. Most of the times I won't hit 4 out of 4 enemies, that's why I want to replace this, and I also want to replace this door with Damage Absorber or another survivability mode. I'm a little underwhelmed with this. I managed to actually die because I was a little careless with this door, so I don't like it at all. Lava Shots is actually one of the best tier 1 mods you can use now. 25% increased firepower when you have active the volcanic rounds, and it scales very well because we'll have a lot of firepower, so it's highly recommended. Now for the weapons, there are actually 2-3 very good weapons you can use. One of the best is probably the Damascus offering because it is a standard variant light machine gun, a lot of clip size, decent RPM, decent standard damage. It has anomaly enchantment, which I highly recommend to use. We have a lot of anomaly power and we can convert this to firepower. That's why we're using 2 pieces with anomaly power instead of bonus firepower. And the other 2 mods must be Fortress, Dark Sacrifice or Mage's Rage. The other weapon I'm very impressed to use is the stabilizing variant from the LMG. It deals a little less standard damage compared to the standard variant of the LMG, however it has better RPM and better critical damage. Now, in specific, the Emerald Chaos has very good because it has critical damage that we need, status power that we need, long range damage is okay, but we would prefer for close range damage or skill life leech. So this is actually very good in case you have something like Fortress or Mage's Rage, add an Anomaly Enchantment, and Emerald Chaos, the Noxious Bond is actually a very impressive tier 3 mod. It deals decent damage, inflicts toxic, and it has probably the widest range I have seen. But in the ideal scenario, we need something like Damascus offering. Instead of skill life leech, you need close range damage to maximize your DPS. Skill life leech is actually very decent and ideal to replace, in my opinion, Dark Sacrifice with the Mage's Rage. Dark Sacrifice is one of the best for single target DPS. However, if we don't have the Damage Absorber or another survivability mode, it's a very high risk because you can die while losing the max health, dropping to 50%. That's why I don't really personally prefer it, and you don't lose so much damage compared to using the other mods. And the LMG is actually the best when you deal with the mobs and most of the enemies. Another good option you can use is a double gun with the Demolition variant. It deals a lot of damage, it has a very good critical multiplier, very good RPM, and you need something with a mod as suggested with critical damage, status power and close range damage or skill life leech. And for the boss killing weapon we need a submachine gun. If you watched my previous video, the submachine gun is actually the best single target DPS weapon for the pyromancer firepower. It has the best RPM, very good damage, very good critical multiplier, and we need something with critical damage, close range damage, status power, and anomaly enchantment, and I add the Fortress or the Mage's Rage, whatever you have. Now I was a little unlucky with my Apocalypse mod. Apart from that, it's a god roll. This, if it was a Mage's Rage or a Dark Sacrifice, this was going to be the god roll weapon for me to always upgrade, but now this is actually very decent. Anomaly enchantment, Fortress, and all the attributes we need, forced to maximize the single target DPS. We actually don't care about the sidearm, just use something that is the highest item to increase your average item level. Don't worry, I always 1 or 2 average item level lower. I upgrade mostly my weapons and find new armor, though probably I will upgrade some armor that has the god rolls or to keep them as I level up. Let's have a closer look at the talents. We're focusing on the Ashbreaker to increase our weapon damage and by extent lower the cooldowns of our two skills that we basically use. I'm going full on damage for Assault Master because we're going to use assault weapons, either the LMG, SMG, double gun or AK. For now AK is not the best because we need something that fires faster in order to increase our damage, and actually that's why I'm stacking Anomaly Power. Hot Situation will increase our Anomaly Power by 45%. By extent, Hot Situation will increase our Anomaly Power by 45%. Because we have decent Anomaly Power and Anomaly Enchantment, this actually makes it very good and scales very well with both Anomaly Power and weapon damage. For survivability, we have Most of the Flame and Leeching Force. This way we have by default 10.5 weapon leech thanks to the Ascension levels, and when you use either skill you have 21% weapon life leech, which is actually very good for survivability. So Ashes to Ashes, Burning Situation, everything for the Ashbreaker, and just one Archmage to increase a little bit the Anomaly Power and by extension our bonus firepower. Now let's have a closer look at the Pax Tree, which is the Gunblazer standard Pax Tree we're using. I personally like Ascent Regalia because we don't need Ashen Wake. The melee damage from your skill deals so many million of damage, one-shots almost everything and anything. You won't get so much benefit from this, and I do prefer Ascent Regalia to become completely unkillable when I kill 3 enemies at least. Even now when I don't have the ideal survivability modes, thanks to Ascent Regalia I have survived so many times, so I personally recommend to use this mode. This is a default hot streak, and we'll go with Carbon Ammo and Bullet Frenzy now. This is the best talent you can get, simply because it doesn't work as it says. I don't know if it's a bug or this is intended. Now, the effect stacks until you stop to gain 3% weapon damage as long as you keep shooting. You don't have to hit the enemies, you have to keep shooting and the weapon will be increased. I don't know if there is an actual cap, there may be no cap or there be a soft cap. Now why this is good? Because as I will explain later, you can actually use a skill and you won't lose Bullet Frenzy. You can stop shooting for a second and you will not lose Bullet Frenzy. You have to stop for I think 2 seconds to lose a Bullet Frenzy. So with this in mind, if you use your rotation a little properly and you don't spam your skills one after the other or your melee skill right after Feed the Flames, you can keep up Bullet Frenzy 100% of the time. Very few enemies can knock you back to make you lose Bullet Frenzy, otherwise if you get knocked back by usual enemies, you still won't lose Bullet Frenzy. That's why it's the best, and actually weapon damage translates into firepower, which translates into the melee damage from the Scorched Zealot set. That's why this works very well. So for the Ascension Priority we go with, once again, number 1 is Anomaly damage because it scales with everything. Number 2 is weapon damage, close range damage, weapon leech, critical damage and damage against elites, and then we're going a little bit on Anomaly Power, Status Power, Resistance Pierce. I do like to have a little bit of Resistance Pierce, I have 25% thanks to both our talents, that's why I'm not going with Curse of the Pompeii. I have more than enough Status Power for now, and I do prefer to have the Resistance Pierce. Skill Life Leech, actually this will help you to heal a lot, even 5.5% is more than enough. And then after all of this I'm going to focus on Endurance. I don't want to go for Critical Chance, it can be decent, but now we have only 3.8% and by adding another 5% won't make a huge difference, but having a little more survivability can make a small difference. Cooldown reduction doesn't stack because we have above the cap with I think it's 55% or 60%, something like that. Once you are above that, this won't give you any benefits, so just ignore it. For the best armor modes, in my case I have to replace 3. It's the White Grip, Death's Door and Bloodlust. I will replace Death's Door, definitely Damage Absorber, my favorite, always active, 10% resistance, better than nothing, and a lot of armor, unconditional, works against bosses. When you are alone, it's very good and I do like it. Now, for the White Grip and Bloodlust, we actually have very decent tier 3 modes we can use. I do like Dead Clock. It basically translates in 60% weapon damage and it's very good. Now another thing you can use in case you're using my weapon that I'm using, the Emerald Chaos and you inflict toxic to enemies, and because we have decent status power, you can use Euthanizer. It's 16% extra damage against enemies afflicted by toxic. This is good for single target DPS and you can wreck the boss and enemies. If you don't use it, it's useless if you cannot apply toxic by any means, but it's a very good alternative. Now, apart from Dead Cloak, there are other mods I want to use. Sharp Eye and Kingslayer, the highest firepower increase mods for the tier 3. And also we have very good decent tier 2 mods you can use. Dum Dum Bullets is one of my favorite, 12% weapon damage for assault weapons that we only use, and this also scales with your set. So that's why I like the Dum Dum Bullets. And above Bloodlust, I prefer Crit Stack. It's better than Bloodlust, but it's worse than all the other options, so it's a very good alternative, because now I'm just going to give you a few alternatives. Personal Space is actually very good if you go for close range damage. If you don't stack close range damage and you go for long range damage, don't use that because it's counterintuitive. Stare into the Barrel can be either good or bad. If you go to close range, this can actually be good, but if you remain in long range most of the times, you won't get that much benefit from this. This actually can work good with Introvert if you go with an SMG as your main weapon and you want to go in close range. This combination can be good, otherwise just use Sharp Eye or Kingslayer. They're much better, and I do like Sharp Eye a little better because it actually procs whenever you hit any kind of enemy. Kingslayer, you have to critical heal a Lich, although the extra mods, we mostly need them against elites or bosses. We melt the normal enemies with all the mods we have. It's excessive force up from this point on. Now we just have to increase a little bit our single target DPS. For the tier 3 mods, there's nothing else I would recommend. I don't want to stack Anomaly Power because we don't get as much benefit compared to pure firepower. That's why I recommend these mods. For survivability, Circle of Power could be very decent to increase your resistance by 20% at least, especially if you go against enemies like Moloch. If you have the Damage Absorber, Circle of Power, and 10% resistance thanks to the Ascension Tree, you will have most of the times 40% resistance, which is actually pretty decent and very easy for survivability. Now, some mods you can avoid for the tier 2 mods. Ash Cleaner has 3 seconds cooldown and I don't like it anymore. If this gets reworked back to 1 second, this would be one of my favorite mods. We don't want the combination of no resistance against the Fortified and Unstoppable Force because we don't have Armor Pierce and we don't want to stack Armor Pierce. That's why we're not using that. Perseverance Feast may seem like a good mod, but it's actually very situational. You have to drop below 30% health to increase your melee damage by 150%, and it has a cooldown for 10 seconds. Why not use Brawl that increases your damage by 100% all the time? And you also can combine this with Martial Arts. It reduces the cooldown of your melee skill, which is actually good in case you plan to spam your melee skill, but in my opinion it's not necessary. I initially tried with this, but with the type of rotation I'm going for, I'm not using this, because I want to plan to use the melee skill after I have used Feed the Flames. And without adding an extra mod for Feed the Flames, the Final Breath to reduce the cooldown by 50%, it doesn't work very well with the Martial Arts. That being said, for tier 1 mods, I don't think anything else you can use. We don't want Anomaly Hunger, we don't want Final Breath because we need to focus both on firepower and the skills, or Fire Eater. Nova is okay, but I don't think it's necessary. There is one only combination I might try, but I don't think it's once again is necessary to use a Radiation Wave to inflict weakness with Trample the Weak. You can basically, instead of these two combination, use for example Dum Dum Bullets. It's always active, and I don't know, Sharp Eye, which is much better. Or instead of Sharp Eye, just use Personal Space. It's 24% increase weapon damage instead of inflicting weakness, and deal 12% damage against enemies afflicted by weakness. You also don't need Reforging Bullets. You have huge magazine size, your Feed the Flames has 5 seconds cooldown, so you will never run out of bullets unless you stop using Feed the Flames. That's the only way to run out of bullets. For the weapon mods, there are not so many good alternative options. You need Anomaly Enchantment to maximize your single target DPS, and for the tier 3 mods, Fortress, Mage's Rage, and Dark Sacrifice. Dark Sacrifice is the best, but I don't prefer it unless I have the best survivability mode that I don't have now. If I have it, I actually will go with Dark Sacrifice, Anomaly Enchantment, and Fortress to maximize my single target DPS with an epic quiz with the attributes we have discussed. there are not so many other good alternatives to increase your single target DPS or AoE, and we don't need to do AoE. We have our melee skill for AoE, and we just need to focus on single target DPS against the rest of the enemies. Let's move on to our rotation because although pretty straightforward, it needs a little mastery in order to maximize your damage during your expeditions, Tarya Gratar, and when you face bosses. You need to keep Bullet Frenzy and Volcanic Rounds up. Volcanic Rounds is easy, as long as you keep using Feed the Flames, they will be up. Bullet Frenzy is tricky, but it's possible even with our setup to keep it up. Now, before we discuss about the Bullet Frenzy, let's discuss about when we will use the melee strike to inflict damage to enemies or bosses or elites. You have to use it after Feed the Flames only when you're facing elites. If you're facing normal enemies, once you have gained enough firepower, even if you haven't used Feed the Flames, you can still use it to just destroy a lot of enemies that are nearby. If you use it after Feed the Flames, you can also kill a lot of elites because you will get a huge buff for the melee damage. So basically, Ash Blast, Feed the Flames, and then melee in order to maximize both single target and AoE. Now let's talk how we can keep Bullet Frenzy up 24/7 or almost 24/7 during the specific sections in Tarya Gratar or Expedition. You see the indicator there, that means you get the buff for the Bullet Frenzy. Ash Blast is not a problem, but Feed the Flames makes you stop shooting. However, you have time to recover if you shoot directly after Feed the Flames and not use anything else. You have to keep shooting no matter what you do. That being said, you have to keep in mind, keep shooting after you do an activity that requires you to stop for a second. Use Feed the Flames for a second, keep shooting, and then use the second, let's say if you want to use your melee attack. Keep shooting, use your melee attack, and then keep shooting to keep Bullet Frenzy up. Roll, because you can roll without losing Bullet Frenzy, but keep shooting in order to keep the buff up. Don't roll and use Feed the Flames, don't use Feed the Flames and use melee attack immediately, otherwise this will cause you to have 2 seconds delay and thus losing the bonus of Bullet Frenzy. Also be very careful if you use your melee attack while standing still. The animation you get, unfortunately, it has a small delay of 2 seconds and thus it will make you lose Bullet Frenzy. However, if you keep moving and use your melee attack, you won't have that delay, so you can take advantage of Bullet Frenzy. So basically, what you can do and what you cannot do for Bullet Frenzy. You can use Feed the Flames, you can roll, you can stop shooting for a second, you can use your melee attack while moving, but you cannot stop shooting for 2 seconds, use your melee attack while standing still, or use 2 activities one after the other, for example, roll and Feed the Flames, or Feed the Flames and melee, or melee and roll, because this will cause you to lose Bullet Frenzy. Apart from that, what I would recommend is hip fire your weapon most of the time. That means don't aim. You don't have to aim. This way you will move faster, aim better, and that's why I like actually the stabilizing variant of the LMG. It has better accuracy. In general, the LMGs have very good accuracy and stability when you hip fire compared to the double guns or the SMGs, and that's why I like them as a main weapon compared to the SMG that I do prefer for single target DPS against bosses, that you can proc Bullet Frenzy much faster. Overall, this build just fixes the problem for the bonus firepower, pure bonus firepower pyromancer that has 4 AoE damage, because otherwise we had to rely on mods in order to maximize the damage. Now our timers for expeditions or Tarya Gratar are much shorter, and the projectile is so good. It has no limit range. You can just shoot the enemy that is across the map. It's very good, very powerful. I do recommend it. If you go for pure firepower build, go with the Scorched Zealot set. They will transform your melee attack to a very good AoE. There is no point not to use that. You get so much benefit, it's very good, inflicts Ash in worst case scenario, so yes, I like it and I do highly recommend it. And so that was it for today's video. I really hope this will help you make your own variation of the bonus firepower Scorched Zealot set for the pyromancer. Very good, very highly recommended. It's actually, I'm very impressed with only 2 mods. We maximize the AoE and single target DPS, that we invest for the melee skill, and finally our melee skill is not useless. It does something very good. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch the video. Extra thank you in case you stick around until the end. Feel free to like and subscribe for more upcoming videos for Outriders Worldslayer and other video games. And as always, I wish you all a wonderful day.